Hello. Today I have the pleasure to speak with Robert Weiß, a highly experienced expert in running IT solutions that are transforming HR operations. Robert has the experience working with big companies like Accenture, like PricewaterhouseCoopers, and working with multinational organizations implementing this big complex solutions that help transform the operations of HR and HR processes. Robert, could you share some information about yourself, about your professional experience, and what type of projects were you running?
Sure. Thank you, Michał, for having me. So, I have over 10 years of experience with HRIS systems, be it Workday on the one side, where I was a long time a consultant implementing that, or now with the younger, or in the young experience with Cornerstone. Overall, there's not much difference regarding the pitfalls and the complexity of those projects. So you can take that advice or tips in both cases or also in other software. I worked with Accenture, for example, or PwC with multinational global projects that took years in the making to finally have a go live, and also costed a ton of money. So happy to be here.
So, Robert, we've met on one of those complex processes of implementing a global IT solution for HR in a multinational organization, which was sort of regulated, not regulated in a validated way, because we have tons of those types of customers, but still it wasn't a piece of cake introducing change in your organization. What, in your opinion, are the key takeaways, key pointers of making the decision behind what is the best suited IT solution for your organization?
So just as a bit of a disclaimer, customers are always asking for the best possible solution. They want to have the best thing out there in the market. And they're saying, well, we are one of the customers of many due to the market on the scale. How did other customers do that? And there is no right or wrong answer. So what is suitable for you could be not suitable for other customer due to the industry, due to the market, due to the requirements that you have. So please take that as a bit of a more or less as an inspiration and not as a 100% granted answer where everything I am saying is right and everything else is wrong. That's not how this works and not how those implementations work. Why? And now I'm getting to one of the points that I want to give to you, Michael, is culture and change management is different in each of those companies. So what might work due to culture, decision-making processes at itself, how you, for example, lived them in the past, how you described them, and also, of course, how you transcribed them, could work for you, but could not work for anybody else. Important is that you have some kind of logic behind that you have a process how to make decisions, that people who attend a workshop are able to make that actual decision so that there is a flow in the project and in the processes itself related to the project. Third, that there is also a change management and communication strategy or plan that is supporting that, because the technology is one thing, but living and breathing that, then in the end, with your employees who are using that software, should use that software on a day-to-day basis, is something completely different. And another point that I want to mention is you also want to have the governance and the operating model suitable for that, because roles might change due to the technical implementation and due to the change management, and people must be aware of that. And the governance and the operating model, so the whole organization, must also reflect that change in the upcoming implementation as part of the project as well.
There will be many decisions that are going in this direction, that direction. There will be always people supporting your decision for that tool. There will be people that think that a different tool will basically be able to answer those pain points a bit better, and nobody's wrong, nobody's right. You make a decision and you need to work on that solution until you make it fit your organization, and there is no way to basically not have challenging points in the implementation, or to basically have this lack of choosing one solution that will answer all of your pain points, or basically help you resolve every problem, every challenge that you have in your organization, because this is a great IT fit solution, right?
Right. And related to that, it's also important to have the right stakeholders on board. So specifically for a European market, it's important to check for data security, data privacy issues. So that is one regulatory requirement that is always important for those projects. Another one is, for example, the Works Council. I have had a lot of customers where we always signed the contract and went already to the first workshops. And then we made the customer aware that in those workshops, the Works Council is not on board. And if the Works Council is already informed about the project, and then the customer told me, well, no, not at that time, maybe at a later time. And that is a regulatory, legally binding requirement that the Works Council needs to agree to such projects if a Works Council is in place. So that can be a very quick showstopper to the actual project, and therefore can burn money and can burn resources unnecessary.
And we are moving in the direction of my next question, because even if you have a great decision-making process, if you have the right people in the right place, even if you think that you thought of every angle of the project, there are always challenges on the way as you go. What, in your opinion, are the biggest challenges in implementing a global solution?
Implementing a global solution has the big challenge that you need to be aware of all requirements that are legally stated in those countries. Best example is if you have a legal entity in Russia or in China, where there are totally different legal requirements compared to USA, South America, or Central Europe or North Europe now with UK, where they have also different legal requirements. So that can also make planning very difficult and make also a big bang approach very difficult. In those cases, it could make sense to have more of a phased approach, have more pilot countries in countries that are mature enough and ready quickly for a release, for example, for a new learning tool or an HCM tool. And then over time, you have a plan to get the rest of the countries ready and on board for the next, let's say, 6, 12, 18 months, depending on the complexity, the maturity, and also the rollout plan.
What would be your advice in managing this big change in the organization?
It could help to communicate as early as possible. You want also to establish a communication channel as quickly as possible. So it also doesn't make sense if you are communicating every time in a different way, be it one time the intranet, another time you are sending an email, the third time you are telling people outside the company on LinkedIn about your project, and then people are also a bit hesitant on why that information is not bundled, why there is no clear communication channel, and if I as an employee want to inform myself, where do I actually find the latest news on that?
Of course, I would be safe about communicating the deadlines. As we know, most of the projects are basically with challenges that may affect the final deadline or the final launch date of the system, and then we need to dynamically change the communication or put the reasons why it will be delayed, and this might cause,
in that case, it could help to be not too specific. For example, if you're starting a project and you want to go live, don't tell people that it goes live on April the 10th, 2027. Just indicate in 2027 we want to go live. The further the project progresses, then you can narrow it down maybe to a quarter and maybe to a month, and then maybe a month or 2 months ahead, then to a very specific date. In that case, you're not running into the issue to be unbelievable regarding constant changes on the one side, and on the other side, it still gives you plenty of room to have internal discussion and internal changes just in case something really changes on the project side and needs to be postponed due to whatever reason.
And on the note of the communication channels that you mentioned, I have an idea which I always try to recommend to our customers, that you can use your own employees as a channel of communication. The lower you will go in the structure, the easier it is to basically transfer or pass the information on. So in my opinion, one of the best things that you can do is to have your advocates in many areas of the structure to basically advocate, inform, and pass on all the necessary information, and be this marketing channel of information of what value it will bring, how many challenges it will basically fix to have this solution, why this is so important and crucial to have this big change, this cultural change in our organization, because this will solve problem A, problem B, problem C, but only if we will use it actively and not basically let it dust and fade away. To help the people that are in between those decisions, let's maybe keep the positive side of the conversation going on. So Robert, in your opinion, what would be the biggest value or values of implementing such a solution to make that big step and introducing this big change, this change management process in the organization, and basically steering things up in the organization?
So one benefit could be very simple and quick, to have data in real time. So that could be, let's stick to the compliance trainings, that you now know in real time the percentage of completed mandatory compliance trainings compared to the past, where you had that data maybe once a month or even once a quarter. So that could be very beneficial to the board, to an external auditor, to know exactly in real time how many compliance trainings are left and what's the quota for your company and what's the plan to reach the annual quota for mandatory compliance training. Another one can be, of course, have all the relevant data in one place, again, in real time. So you don't need to search in 20 different systems and merge it in an Excel list, but you know with the press of a button exactly how many employees do you have. Did they already do their onboarding training? How is it regarding skills and talent? Is there a succession plan in place? How was the performance of that employee? And how many trainings are still left for that employee until he's moving either outside the company or maybe to a different role, etc., etc. So that all the way with upskilling and reskilling also is based on available data. If you don't know what John Doe's job description actually is, or job title, who the manager of John Doe is, and what he's actually doing on a day-to-day basis, it's very hard to upskill or reskill him or her. And on the other side, if there is a potential replacement, who actually should do that? So there is information missing for the recruiter, for the manager, for the talent administrator, for the learning administrator, and also from a reporting side for the reporting administrator to have that specific line. And last but not least, it makes it easier to fulfill regulatory requirements like reporting with the press of the button, because Excel with an auditor is actually not really well seen. They try to switch also, or force customers to switch to other systems where data is much, much more reliable compared to an Excel file. So at least on that regards, it's very helpful to have an audit-proof system like Cornerstone to follow up on certain data compared to an on-prem Excel file that you can manipulate every single day.
Robert, you've mentioned a valid point regarding the data being a crucial point for the regulatory sector, for the companies that need to go through an audit, that needs to be one click away to generate a crucial report to basically prove that they are following the letter of the law. And this is something that we as eConsulting, as implementation partner, are aware of, because we are working closely with life science sector. So we not only work with the general regulations like GDPR, GMP, we are working with those niche specifications that are in many cases even fighting with each other, because you have different regulations on GDPR, you have different regulations on GXP, and those laws are not cooperating together, and this is always a challenge how to fit them both in one platform. That's why this is like an additional value of those evolved, mature IT systems, IT tools that are used by hundreds, thousands of customers out there globally, and they are feeling safe about it. Those are problems or challenges that are already being handled by so many other companies, so you can feel safer about it. But this is only one area of how we can help in this regulation war and how to basically come out safe after an audit of after a new laws come into the organization, and you need to prove that you are following the regulation. But I know that you have also an additional point of view on the matter, so if you can share.
Yeah, so of course, regulatory requirements are very important, and that is also affecting reporting regarding ESG or CSRD. So specifically when you are in Europe or working on certain sectors also globally, at least ESG regulatory requirements might apply to you and your company. And also global SaaS systems can help you with that. Like age, for example, like gender, that can also be answered quickly if you have unified data and all data stored in one place, to have that with the press of a button compared to, again, merge it in Excel and so on and so forth. And therefore, it's easier then to have the data, export the data, and make it available to auditors or to anybody else who needs to have that. ESG specifically on the social part, again, the number of employees, for example, and also on the global perspective, employees per country or gender per country, and for CSRD as well, like certain age patterns or age blocks, also on a global scale, or women in leadership, for example, on that regards. So those systems can definitely be beneficial to answer that question quicker and easier and more reliable compared to the past.
We've touched the regulations and the whole security layer of those complex IT solutions that help you follow the letter of law and follow the regulations that are always changing. This is a dynamic situation. You can have one configuration and you cannot feel safe about it. Definitely the law will change, regulations will come as something new, and you will need to change it. This is one risk that you need to mitigate, having a perfectly configured and running IT solution in your organization. But there is also one thing which is at one hand a huge value of SaaS platforms, and at the other hand is a huge risk that you need to mitigate. And I'm thinking about those releases that are coming with each SaaS platform.
That's the first thing that is overwhelming customers, because after the implementation, they think, oh, I'm done with the project, I'm fine, and now I have time that I can spend on my actual work. And that's not how this work and not how those projects work. Secondly, I would recommend to have a clear responsibility in role, who is handling those changes. That can be a combination either of, for example, HR or IT. Specifically on mandatory changes, there can be an impact, for example, on integrations as well, if that is in place. But in many cases, it's only affecting HR. And then the overall system admin or key user, whatever the role is called within your organization, needs to reach out to that subject matter expert that is actually affected by that mandatory change and needs to test that together with the subject matter expert if there is a testing procedure, or at least discuss the change and if and how that will affect the project, future projects, or any feature on the model as well. Therefore, it can be helpful to have a constant report to the implementation partner, who makes you aware of those changes as soon as they are published on the Cornerstone website. So all vendors publish that information regarding new releases on the website. So have that constantly in your mind. Reach out to Cornerstone, to your account manager if needed and required. For example, if that is not clear what is actually meant by that release, and reserve some time to test it and check it yourself. There's always a pro release or upcoming release in the pilot system or in a sandbox system first, before it goes live. And it can be very beneficial to actually test that feature, even if it's mandatory or you think it does not need to be tested, just to get yourself, or at least the SME, yourself familiar with the new feature and with those changes. So it's also easier then to document that, have that in the processes, and also communicate that to every stakeholder that is affected by that change.
Do you see any other risks for a company that is not from a validated life science sector, but is still having those challenges that if you change something in area 1 of the company, it will impact area B or area C? So what other risks do you see in that process?
So a high localization can make, of course, sense if the process itself needs to be local. So best example is recruiting. There are certain ways regarding recruiting and talent acquisition that are globally comparable, but there could be some things or some process steps that are highly locally. In that cases, it of course makes sense to localize those process steps, which gives, of course, additional complexity, because once you need to change that process due to, for example, mandatory new features or a new process step that has been rolled out by Cornerstone, you suddenly don't need to change one process, but you have sub-processes localized that also needs to be changed and tested. And suddenly you have a much higher complexity compared to a global learning process where you just have one or maybe two approval steps in it, which might be different in other models like, again, recruiting, or also in performance management or succession due to regulatory local requirements.
And you fight it on the both sides of the story. So you were part of the big consultant companies, and you were the part that was responsible for the implementation of the project from inside of the organization. So what would be your advice of cooperating with an outside company, having those difficult conversations? Who should we trust? Should we trust from the story that we hear from inside of the organization, or should we trust an outside company that doesn't have the historical knowledge on why we do things?
What can be helpful is have a clear process behind it. So if a decision or a recommendation is done in one or the other side, have a documentation about it or have an open discussion about it. So why is the recommendation done in a certain way? What are the alternatives? What are the consequences of the alternative? And discuss that openly with the relevant stakeholders. If by whatever chance you are not trusting that source, and you think that either you cannot grasp the information that has been presented to you, or you don't trust the information, what can be beneficial is have a client board or a customer board where you have once a quarter or even once a month an exchange with other customers who were in the same shoes as you have been, and have an open change discussion with them. Make the decision or the recommendation transparent to them and discuss with them why you think that recommendation is not to be trusted, and if the other client of that vendor or that model took that recommendation and what the consequences are. So the chances are very high that you are not the first one and not the only one confronted with that kind of decision and recommendation. So find another customer, discuss that with them, and ask them how that consequences are taken, and if they followed the recommendation and why they did that. So that can help building trust in the implementation partner and follow the recommendation.
Robert, thank you very much for the conversation. I hope that everyone that was watching the conversation enjoyed it as much as I did. And I hope that this is not our last conversation regarding Cornerstone or such a system.
Thank you so much, Michał. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you.
Thank you.